Welcome to America on the Docket. I'm Carolyn Bruck. We begin this Friday edition of America on the Docket in Indiana, where the widely anticipated trial against Richard Allen is now underway. Allen is charged with the 2017 murders of two young teenage girls, 13-year-old Abigail Williams and 14-year-old Liberty German. Police say Allen killed them along a trail just outside of the town of Delphi. He was arrested 5 years later in 2022 and also charged with 2 additional counts of murder while committing or attempting to commit kidnapping. Joining me now to talk more about this trial is Paul Henderson, a legal analyst, and Barbara McDonald, a senior producer for Court TV, who was inside the courtroom today. Thank you so much for being here. It is day 1 of this trial. The prosecution and the defense delivered their opening statements. Barbara, get us up to speed about what was said in that courtroom.
I actually wasn't in the courtroom today, but we are utilizing pool reporters who are sharing their notes with us and coming out during the breaks and giving us briefings on what they saw, what they heard, how the jury is reacting. So the beginning of the day, 9 a.m., we started with opening statements from the elected prosecutor of Carroll County, Nicholas McClelland. He spent about 13 minutes delivering his opening statements, and he talked about now is the time we get to hear the rest of the story. Law enforcement has held details of this case very close to the vest since it happened in 2017, releasing only as much information as they felt would help them solve it. Now the prosecutor says we get to hear the rest of the story. And one of the things that he said, he's really playing on the emotion of the tragedy here. And he said the very last thing that Abby and Libby saw before their throats were slit was the face of Richard Allen. The prosecutor also talked about a witness who in 2019 told law enforcement that she saw a man walking on the roadway leading back to where it's believed that Richard Allen parked his car that day, and that the man was wearing a blue jacket and was muddy and bloody, and he looked as if he had slaughtered a pig, were her words. But the defense attorney, in his opening statement to the jurors, he spent about an hour today, and he said that same witness 2 years prior, right after the murders happened, told law enforcement that the man was simply wearing a tan jacket and was only muddy. So it'll be interesting when that witness comes in to testify what she says in court about what she saw and when she saw it.
Yeah, Paul, there is really no other way to describe the details of this case. They are simply horrific. What happened to these 8th grade girls, as cliche as it sounds to say, it really is a parent's worst nightmare. These girls, Libby and Abby, they were out having fun on a hike. They were taking pictures and videos. They were playing around when they were killed by someone who they actually captured, they think, in those photos and videos. Their bodies were discovered the next day. How will these images that are captured by the girls themselves factor into this case for both the prosecution and the defense?
Well, the prosecution is going to use that evidence, and you're going to see a lot of that evidence because there's no murder weapon. They don't have the gun that's alleged to have been used in this crime, nor do they have the knife that was used that killed the girls. And so what we do have is that video. You're going to see that video, and you're going to see a comparison being made to the defendant as to how it could have been him as one of the suspects or the main suspect and how this crime occurred, as well as the voice. Does not surprise me if you will see a voice recognition expert put on the stand by both sides. But I think the real damning evidence, what's going to be at the center of this case in particular, are the confessions that were made and alleged in this case. And the judge has already ruled that that confession, those confessions, not just 1 or 2, there's over 60 in this case. And the judge has already ruled in limine motions that those confessions are going to be admissible. So you're going to hear them, and I think that's going to be the linchpin that's going to turn the analysis in this case that everyone should be leaning into and understanding. Just for legal clarification, the confessions have to be knowingly made, intelligently made, and voluntarily made. That legal threshold has already been cleared by the judge, which is why we're going to hear that evidence. I think that's what's going to turn here for the jury and what they'll be paying attention to, not just if a confession has been made, but whether or not in that confession, information that only the person that committed the offense would know. And that's the evidence that the prosecutor was talking about in the beginning and teasing it out when he made his opening statements. And I think that's what's going to make the case turn. That's what people are going to be paying attention to.
And, you know, Barbara, the interesting thing is we did find out that Abby and Libby, their throats were slit. We found out the manner in which they died. This was something that was withheld prior to these opening statements. Why withhold that information from the public?
Law enforcement for a long time had said they didn't want to give details like that because if somebody did come forward during the nearly 5 years they were investigating this case before they made an arrest, they wanted to know that if somebody showed up and offered a confession ahead of time, that they could verify that information and it would be information that had never been released before. We did get a sense of how the girls had died from the defense in a filing a few months ago. But yeah, that was not something that was ever really released to the public or talked about by law enforcement.
Paul, the suspect, Richard Allen, he wasn't arrested until 5 years after the girls were killed. And we know that people in that small community of Delphi, they were shocked at the arrest of a man who many say blended in to that small community. He's a guy in his 50s. He's a husband. He's a father. He worked at the local pharmacy. What hard evidence connects Richard Allen to these murders?
I mean, there are several things that tie and connect him to it. One is the shell casing that is connected to a pistol that he owned that was found near the scene that was there. Secondarily is his known movements, which were in the area around the time. And then third, and again, this is the most credible thing that I think is going to be the linchpin, are his over 60 confessions about committing the crime. And the defense attorney has already indicated that his client was mentally ill when he made those confessions. But I think what's going to be very telling, and probably was very telling to the court when they determined that those confessions would be admissible, was that after the crime occurred, he lived a perfectly regular life, blended in with the rest of the community and society, and he was fine then. And I'll bet that was one of the factors that you'll hear about in this case, about why those confessions are going to be admissible. And I think that's going to be the real linchpin of what people are going to pay attention to in this case. Because, again, there's not a lot of physical evidence in this case. They did not find the murder weapon. We only have the corroborative evidence that I was referencing.
There are certain cases that captivate a nation. This is one of those cases. Barbara, you have extensive experience in the courtroom. You work for Court TV after all. What makes this case one of those that has so many people invested in the outcome?
I think it was a shocking crime that the bodies of these girls were found on Valentine's Day. They had gone missing the day prior. That had made national news. It was two girls together. They were out in the middle of the afternoon on a sunny Monday afternoon. You know, when I was growing up, my mom always said, go with somebody, right? Don't be alone. And you're safer that way. There's safety in numbers. And I think that's part of what attracted people to this case. And just the scenery, to imagine these girls walking across this abandoned railroad trestle 60 feet above a creek, no sides. The railroad ties are unevenly spaced and you could see down to the creek below. There were so many dangers presented by this bridge, and nobody imagined that it would be a man on the bridge abducting the girls that would be the cause of them going missing. And Libby had taken a Snapchat picture of her friend Abby as they crossed that bridge and posted it to Snapchat just 6 minutes before they were approached by the man on that bridge. And then, of course, we have the video that Libby captured of the man walking up to them and saying, guys, down the hill. And so I think all of those elements combined came together and really captivated people in the very beginning. And they felt a lot of sympathy for these girls and these families who have been waiting nearly 8 years for justice.
Yeah, it is simply heartbreaking. Legal analyst Paul Henderson, Court TV senior producer Barbara McDonald, thank you so much for your time. Appreciate you guys.